Well, AfriForum CEO Kallie Kriel joins us now for more. And of course, Kallie, a good evening to you. I believe that you are still in Washington, D.C., in the U.S. And perhaps a great place to start, Kallie, would be for you to explain to us what it is this time that brings AfriForum all the way to Washington, D.C., the very purpose of that trip and discussions with Trump's administration and what you've shared with them from your perspective.
Yes, good evening, and well, it's good afternoon here in Washington. I'm here in front of the Capitol building. We just had a constructive meeting with senior representatives on the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Representatives. And it was good to hear firsthand what their views are. And of course, we had the opportunity to convey our views. Our mission here is to fight for the interests of the country, of South Africa, of its people, and for Afrikaners. Because the fact is, I've listened to some of the inserts here that says this is misinformation. The fact is, I just had a meeting with congressmen that said they've been monitoring what is happening in South Africa for many years now. They saw when former Minister Naledi Pandor had a photo opportunity with the Iranian Prime Minister or leader. They saw a number of actions from South Africa, and that is why they decided to act. These people that say we should not come here, we should just deny that everything is happening, think that's going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve it. It's going to make it worse. When we actually spoke to these House of Representatives members and told them, no, South Africa is saying it's just a big misunderstanding, it was actually, they laughed because they said, well, these are the facts. And I have a huge list that was taken up in a bill to review their relationship with South Africa.
What is that list,
So they know these things.
What is in that list?
Well,
because we haven't even touched on expropriation. You've gone to relations with countries in the Middle East and a picture that Naledi Pandor took with the Iranian Prime Minister. So what is in that list of what they've been watching in South Africa?
Well, they've also been watching with regard to somebody like Julius Malema saying Boers must be killed, and also seeing that President Ramaphosa and ANC leaders were quiet in that regard. They weren't just quiet. Former of President Ramaphosa came to the US denying that there is something like farm murders. They read the Expropriation Act. They can read Section 12.3 and they can read Section 19.8 and see what the implications are. I wish these people that say we are spreading misinformation would take the time to go and read the Act for themselves. And remember, this is not just an issue that affects Afrikaners. If we look what happened in Zimbabwe, the poorest of the poor were hit hard. They have come to South Africa in millions because if you disrespect property rights, you destroy your economy, you get hyperinflation, you get joblessness. And the loyal thing for us to do, to fight for the people of South Africa, is to say, we need to stop this. We tried to speak to the president locally. He simply ignored us. And hopefully the pressure here would make them rethink on the terrible route they take in South Africa.
Yeah, I need to just step in the interest of time here, Kallie. You mentioned in the list of concerns that have been watched by the U.S. government over years. You talk about utterances by Julius Malema that you say the U.S. believes encourage the killing of the farmer. But did you, in that interaction then with the administration representatives, mention and clarify the statistics around farm murders? In fact, stats just last week that show that, and these are police stats, that show that one farmer was killed in the third quarter of 2024-2025. One.
Yes, that's exactly the problem, that we have this misinformation from the Minister of Police. AfriForum has a list of all the farmers that were killed over the last 3 months. It is a total lie. We can give people names of people that were killed in this time. We can tell you about the tortures that they underwent. And this is exactly what makes us angry and what leads to a situation that we have to come here. Because locally there's denialism. Locally, the president refuses to speak to us or he ignores our letters when they do negotiate with us on the Anti-Afrikaans Bella Act. That of course threatens our cultural existence because it wants to destroy Afrikaans schools. They did negotiate. It was mandated by President Ramaphosa. And in the end, after an agreement was reached, he said, no, he does not know about it. So he lied. He refuses to speak to us. And what do people think? Should we take that lying down? No, we won't. So we will take on this issue. It's not only in the interest of Afrikaners. We need to save our country. And to do that, there must be pressure on ANC leaders to get rid of these irresponsible policies. You are seeing our municipalities deteriorating, service delivery to the poor is falling apart, and now you have these politicians that simply wants to blame someone else. It's time they take responsibility for the negative consequences of their behavior.
You mentioned one of the concerns being former DIRCO Minister Naledi Pandor's picture with the Iranian Prime Minister. I'm curious then around AfriForum's position on the matter that South Africa has taken forward to the ICJ over the war in Gaza. And because for many pundits, at the core of why South Africa has lost critical funding to HIV patients is because, not just because of what has been put forward by AfriForum, but also because there is a sense that the real heart of the issue here is the issue at the ICJ. So is it possible that AfriForum is pandering to a much bigger narrative than just land expropriation and certainly local policy here in South Africa?
Well, remember, we don't have to inform the US what South Africa is doing on the international stage. They can see it for themselves. Our view is actually to say, let's put the interests of South African people first. If you do that, you would say, what is in the interest of our people? And then you would say, let's stay out of international fights. If you look at the place like India, they're part of BRICS, they trade with China, they trade with Russia, but they also have a good relationship with the USA because they don't involve themselves in that international conflicts. We can have a good moral argument on what the foreign policy of our country should be. The biggest moral issue here is we have poverty in our country, we have unemployment in our country. We cannot afford, as an economy that's 0.4% of the world economy, to now and start get involved in fights with countries that are much bigger than us. So that is the real issue. Because of ideological reasons, ANC leaders have decided to put the citizens of South Africa's future at risk to get involved in those conflicts.
Okay.
And we should get out of that. We should not side with the US. But we should most definitely not side against them.
Okay, Kallie, your point is made. Yeah, I need to move on. I think that point is made. I need to look at other issues now. So the request that you've made now to the White House, and I'd like for you to clarify that for us. You might remember that the executive order by Trump also invited Afrikaner South Africans to come and resettle in the US and get refugee status. There's a whole lot to be said about what that process would look like, because surely it would even involve some workings by the UN. But now your request is not for South African Afrikaners to go to the US. You're asking for them to be assisted by Trump while here in South Africa. Explain what that would look like. What is it exactly that you've asked for the Afrikaners living in South Africa that are not leaving?
Yes, I'll do that. Just with regard to the decision of people to leave for the US or not, we respect the decision of people that decide they want to do that. We are not here to try and stop that program. But what we are saying, the vast majority of Afrikaners can only as a community survive on the southern tip of Africa, because if we go elsewhere, we will simply be assimilated and we will lose our culture that we fought dearly for. What we said with regard to South Africa, you remember that President Trump not only mentioned refugee status, it was mentioned also in the piece written by the American Embassy in South Africa, that they speak about humanitarian assistance, including the refugee program. So it's much broader. And our view is, if you have a government that's trying to destroy Afrikaans schools, then we are in a position that we have to provide our own schools. The situation is the government pushed out Afrikaans as a language of tuition at public universities. Then we had to build our own university. So it's not that we neglected by the South African government, it's worse. They are governing against us. And we don't get taxpayers' money to build these institutions. And in that sense, we appreciate the fact that the US is worried about the situation of Afrikaners, and we are giving them practical ways to assist in this regard.
Okay. Kallie, let's leave it there. Kallie Kriel is the CEO of AfriForum, and he's speaking to us live from Washington, D.C., doubling down, it seems, on the need to continue talks with the U.S. despite a structure such as the South African Chamber of Commerce in the U.S. asking for them to cease and desist. Well, for more on this discussion, we are joined by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's Executive Director, Mr. Nishan Bolton, Wits University Center for Diversity Studies Director, Professor Melissa Steyn, and June 16 Soweto Uprising leader and anti-apartheid veteran Seth Mazibuko also will join us in a moment. But we're taking your calls as well. 010-594-6010, and feel free to send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584.